In this episode of the podcast, we're talking to Chris Hemphill. So Chris is an ultra runner, a musician, and a data scientist. And we're going to talk about all of those things in this podcast. We're going to spend a good amount of time on ultra running and the nutrition behind it, because that's something that I've been curious about for quite a while. Then we're going to get into kind of the whys of what Chris does and why he does it. It's going to be an interesting conversation. Let's go ahead and dive in. This is the TSS Podcast. It's a place for authentic conversations to uncover the stupid, simple truths that help us succeed in business, create better relationships, and lead more fulfilling lives. Welcome to Think Stupid Simple. Chris, so welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you being here. And dude, I didn't even tell you this part, but we kind of have a ritual of lighting a candle with each new guest. This is our meeting of the minds candle.
I should have prepared a candle.
No, you are good. Dude, just in this couple minutes prior, the first thing that I think is absolutely fascinating that I wanted to talk about, we're going to kind of center the conversation around finding yourself on this journey, but you are probably one of the only people I know that runs ultras. I mean, that I know personally.
Well, that's likely true, because the thing about ultra runners is you'll know it. They'll be bragging about it, and you'll see it a lot on social media. So likely true.
It takes a very special person to want to torture yourself. I mean, these are 100-mile races, are they not? What is considered ultra? Is it 100-mile and beyond?
Actually, an ultra is anything that's beyond a marathon. So
okay.
So if you run 26.20000000126, you can wear the badge. You can collect the finisher medal for it. But commonly, your most common ultra distance is 50K. So that's about 30.
Okay.
Yeah. So about 31 miles. And then people get bitten by the bug and go 50 miles, 100K, which is around 62. 100-mile runs, 200. I haven't gone that crazy yet, all the way up to the 200 distance. But it's a really interesting community. Like if you look up on this website called Ultra Sign Up, which actually tells you where all the ultra runs are happening. And if you go to an ultra run, like identify an ultra run that's near you and go in as a volunteer, reach out to the race director and offer to volunteer. That's kind of where I kind of got a big intro to it, is like sitting at an aid station. You know, somebody's like 30 miles into a race and they're like a completely different person, and you're like helping them with like whatever their needs are, putting food in their pouches and stuff like that. It's just inspiring being out there. That's kind of what made me want to go like those longer distance. I had been doing trail runs and stuff like that, but seeing and like kind of just like being in awe of these people who are like 40% done with a 100-mile run, that kind of stuff. Just seeing them kind of made me want to kind of chase after their shoes.
That's wild. I mean, I've heard there's some pretty famous ultra marathons like the Leadville 100. Have you done 100 yet?
Yes. Yeah. Back in 2017, there was one in Alabama called Lake Martin. There have been attempts before then and after then, but the successful one was 2017.
Okay. Dude, I imagine that were you doing marathons before ultras, or has running always been something you've enjoyed?
Picked up running pretty recently, actually. So,
really?
Fairly recently, like within the last decade. In 2013, I had lost a lot of weight in 2012, but I found it coming back in 2013, and at the beginning of 2014, I decided, hey, let's do something drastic here. Let's switch things up a bit. So New Year's resolution was to run a half marathon. Mm-hmm. Like I was training, I was trying to build up to that point. But in the process, during one of the training runs, I got lost, and this gang of friendly people ran up. I was like almost ready to call a cab. We didn't have Uber in Birmingham at the time, but I was almost ready to call a cab at the time to go home, because I was completely lost, didn't know where I was going. But there was this gang of three people that found me, and I was like, oh well, we're going the same way. We're on the same route. And I was like, okay, cool. So I ran with them, and they actually one of them happened to be an ultra runner, and in that training process, like talking with him and training with him a lot, completely forgot about that half marathon goal and actually doubled that to do a full marathon in November of that year. So kind of that's where it got started, was kind of peer pressure, just being around them. And then the first and the first ultra marathon came, I believe, that following March or April. Lake Martin has a 50-mile and a 27-mile option as well. So first time breaking that marathon distance was like that following year in 2015 with the 50-mile distance.
Now, I'm curious, New Year's resolutions generally don't stick most of the time because it takes, for most of us, it takes more than just simply a decision to change something. It has to come down to like an internal belief or something that changes inside, right? What was it for you that kind of made this work? Was there a switch that was flipped at some point?
So New Year's resolutions, maybe often they shouldn't stick. But this one, this one, it just became kind of an obsession. So what if I hadn't gotten lost that day? And I get lost a lot, but what if I hadn't gotten lost that particular day and met those people who I was conspiring with? So the New Year's resolution was to do 13.1, but it ended up getting doubled because of the people that I surrounded myself
on that day.
around.
You doubled it. Was it on that day?
I was training. And I met this group of people that made me forget the half marathon goal. Like I hadn't even run like more than 10 miles by that point, but this group of people made me forget that half marathon goal and doubled it. So perhaps with any kind of change, like a significant change that you're trying to make, it really helps to be part of a community.
For sure.
And in Birmingham, there's a strong trail running community called BUTS, Birmingham Ultra Trail Society. And yeah, they're very self-aware. But I think it was just being part of that. Like if I didn't have a slew of people that I'd added on Facebook, finishing all these races, or if I hadn't gone and volunteered at a couple and been friends with these people who were doing it over and over again, then maybe my mind would have gotten lost and would have strayed, like not discovered that whole thing. So I would say that a big impact is the community aspect. And it's kind of something that I recommend when other people want to get into running and stuff like that.
Is that still, if you're going to run a 100-mile ultra marathon, man, I have to believe that this is coming from something deeper than just the communal aspect of running with other people. Like there has to be something inside of you that's pushing you to go these distances. What is it for you that gets you going?
Well, there's all kinds of things. Some of them are kind of embarrassing to admit, but I'll admit them. Is that there's an obsessive quality that comes with it. Like it takes wanting it really bad, like really wanting like just being able to put your mind to this thing and then finish it all the way through. But what can potentially drive that want? I have this weird curiosity about like how I would react or how I would feel in extreme situations. One example of that will, like while I was running the 50-mile, you meet people, you talk with people while you're huffing and puffing on the trail, and they said, "Why are you out here?" And I said, "Well, I just want to know how it feels." And like they laughed at me for that answer, but like it was the honest truth. So where does the mind take you? Where are you within that 100-mile journey? What do you learn about yourself? What do you confront? Those are kinds of things that I had this kind of raging curiosity about. The other thing was the embarrassing part was I had gone on Facebook and said, "Hey, I'm going to do this thing," and I didn't want to be that person making that post saying, "Yeah, I gave it my all," and blah blah blah. I had to back out at mile whatever. Like I didn't want to have to eat the crow. So lots and lots of reasons, but there's kind of like an obsessive quality on my end and on the end of a lot of people that I talk to. And when you're out there on the trails and having some of the deeper conversations with people, it is some people's ways of processing really difficult life decisions that they've had to make, or different life situations, or even like some people were just out there and it helped them process things that had gone on since childhood. So all kinds of reasons that are bringing people out to the trail, ranging from competitiveness to Instagram to like deeper things inside.
Interesting. So for you, it's largely curiosity, this desire to know what it's like to be at mile 70 or mile 80, what the mind is doing, what the body's doing.
That was a huge draw in the first place. And it was really just being in that completely different place. And when you're out there, if you're running out in the streets and you've committed to this thing, well, if you're in the streets, you can Uber home if you get tired. But when you're out in the woods, there's not as many options there too. So you jump into it and you go past the point of no return, and that can also help fuel the desire to get all the way to the finish.
I mean, that is an interesting. So I'm a huge fan of David Goggins, and there's a lot of people that I follow that are in that community, especially in kind of like the more endurance athlete space. I don't have that curiosity, my friend. I'm good.
Good. I mean, the first time it was even brought up to me, like I was running with one of those people that found this lost soul, and he told me that he runs a 100-miler at least once a year, and I was like, why? Dang. Who would do that? But just being around that, and like getting past the first marathon and then doing deeper and deeper distances, it kind of you gradually ease into it sometimes.
Yeah,
ease into it. It's not that easy, but
that's interesting. I mean, maybe at some point I will develop that, but that's not something that I do like cycling, and so like but the equivalent would be like on cycling, I do maybe like 100 miles would be like my max, but that's just basically a marathon. It's not even a marathon. That's like a half marathon in terms of like length of time, or, that's maybe a 4 to 5 hour, 6 hour ride, versus you're talking like these ultras that's like a 24-hour run, isn't it?
For the people that are fast. For the people that are fast. It took me 31 hours to do the one in 2017, but it can go well beyond 24 hours for sure.
That's wild. So what are some of the considerations, because I am very curious about this subject, in terms of one of the things that I've been trying to study more on is I've understood fitness and nutrition for a while now, but there's a completely different aspect of nutrition and fitness when it comes to endurance sports. So what have you kind of learned that needs to be taken into consideration over longer periods of time when you're running for 30 hours?
Love that question, because it was kind of one of the people that groomed me up just kind of in early runs. He was talking about how you start thinking about your body as a machine. And you start thinking about, I need this many calories at this interval to make sure that I'm treating my gut properly.
Literally call it fuel.
Yes. Yeah. So you get to a point where you start referring to food as fuel or nutrition rather than food. And there's I can't say that my way is the best way or the only way. There's so many different ways to do it. A couple of examples. You have Scott Jurek and you have Carl Meltzer. Those are two people that both completed an ultra run all the way down the Appalachian Trail at record speeds. They're record-setting ultra runners in that. Scott Jurek's diet was a very carefully crafted vegan diet, whereas Carl Meltzer subsided on pizza and beer for a lot of the run. So there's just
clearly good approaches. Genetics.
Maybe,
if you can do genetics. Pizza and beer, man.
For myself, an observation is that they know like the people who set up these aid stations, these tents. So like while you're running, you're not doing it
Yeah.
alone. There's a whole community supporting you. So like if you're going 100 miles, there's hopefully going to be an aid station every 8 to 11 miles or so.
Yeah.
There's some torture races that don't do that, but hopefully you're going to have an aid station there, and they'll have a range of foods out. They'll have everything from like pickles, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, or there might be people making tortillas and
Pickles.
making, yeah, there's all kinds of weird food that sits out there. And you start you're listening to your body, and you're looking at the range of food available, and I'm like, I want peanut butter and jelly sandwich right now, and there's some oranges. Oh gosh, I need to drink pickle juice right now. Your body just starts telling you these weird things because,
What the heck?
yeah, I think it's kind of it gets kind of acclimated to, well, I'm low on potassium right now, or I'm low
Sure.
on sugar and things like that. So you just find you kind of let your hand guide you over to the food that you want, and it just turns out crazy sometimes.
But what's in pickles in particular? Like what nutrient is there?
That has all your electrolytes, so your sodium,
Oh,
phosphorus, yeah, potassium. Like like you've met somebody who's been doing a lot of trail ultras when they just get excited to drink down some pickle juice, because later on in the run, when you're kind of depleted of that, it restores you, and it helps you with any cramps that you might be dealing with.
so Gatorade's got it wrong then. I mean, what we needed
Gatorade,
all along was just pickle juice.
that's what we needed, a pouch of pickle juice.
That's so nasty. But I love it. I mean,
But yeah,
mustard is one of those things too, right? Mustard is isn't mustard on the list of endurance nutrition?
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it at any aid station, so I'm gonna have to
Interesting.
make sure. I'm gonna have to tell. I'm gonna have to tell them to start stocking some mustard.
I wonder if I got it wrong. I thought mustard had something in it. It might have been, you know what? I don't remember. But, I'm a person that has a sensitive stomach. So when I go, I do a lot of jujitsu. I do a lot of 1-2 hour bike rides. But before any activity, one of the things that has always kept me from marathon running is that constant need to refuel. And I don't do well with any food in my stomach before activity. I don't know if that's something did you ever get used to that, or was it always okay?
A lot of people will tell you that training for an ultra or training for long distance is also just training your body on how to eat.
I see.
So now, whereas I was kind of the same way. I wouldn't want to eat before a run ever. But
Yeah.
now my typical, I'll stop off at a QT gas station and pick up a slice of breakfast pizza, and that'll be kind of like the fuel that gets me started before like the long run of the day.
I would be
And
in trouble if I
uh,
did that, dude.
so somehow it's weird, but it's consistent. Like that's what I want. My body's telling me to like get that particular pizza with the sausage and gravy on it, and that's where I go. But another part, so while you're training your body to go those distances, you get acclimated to the diet, and there's also other kinds of things for like if you do have trouble eating solid foods,
Hmm.
there's things like goo gels, which I find to be disgusting.
I do
And
okay with those though. That's what I
ah,
do on bike rides. I can do
oh,
like, yeah.
then yeah, you're probably looking at 1 or 2 goo gels an hour to fuel through like a marathon. And there's other stuff like I'm really partial to this thing called Tailwind, which I
Okay.
think that's made for long bike rides as well. But you mix it in with your water, and it gives you nutrients and in some cases caffeine.
I'm gonna have to look this up. Tailwind. Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of that one. Dude, this is wild. So, what are some of the I mean, you mentioned earlier that kind of running was this first thing that led to other things. I'm very curious. What were the mindset shifts and the things that you were learning when you were going on these runs, as you would increase the distance and what were you gaining from it mentally?
Well, I want to go a little bit backwards. Because there's a lot of things that were in play, but actually
Yeah.
playing like learning piano was
Okay.
actually kind of the first thing. And I did that at a pretty late age. I think I was like 25, 26 when I took that up. But that like learning music actually got me comfortable with the idea of even considering long runs.
Why?
And
Why did those two things relate?
because when I picked up piano just thinking that I was just gonna play around and have some fun and like bang out some notes and then get tired of it after a while. But what happened was I kept practicing for hours and hours every day, and I started learning things about how to learn. So while
Mm.
picking up while playing piano, I realized like there has to be this focus on consistent form and building up strength in like your pinky fingers and fingers that are less used. There was all these kinds of things that I realized like, oh, if I keep doing this repetitive motion over and over, if I keep playing scales over and over, or keep practicing this, eventually it sounds good. And by eventually that could mean over the course of a few hours or over the course of months of practicing on a particular piece. But by doing that, like by going into it with like no faith in myself, to then like hearing some music that I'd grown up with like coming out in kind of a good way
Mm-hmm.
after all that practice, that opened up the door to say, okay, if I want to learn something, then I have to go through these repetitive motions or go through these processes or just keep at it and identify where my weaknesses are and keep like focus on building those and let that exercise or let that repetition be a gap to the next stage. So um, I guess that's kind of what gave me the confidence to that, hey, if there's a certain form and a certain tempo that's going to make a piece of music sound good, then maybe I can find that outside on the trails, outside while running. And that that kind of solidified it, because like honestly, like in 2010, I was over 220 pounds. I was a much heavier person than I am now, and just going like running transformed my body and transformed me so much that it was actually a little bit shocking, like being at times looking in the mirror and not really recognizing or even accepting myself as somebody who had lost a lot of weight. So it was really like going through a body transformation was a really big mental transformation too. And honestly, I would say that the body transformed before the mind. Like there was a lot of reckoning and a lot of catch up that my mind had to do to start reconciling this new body that was created. I don't know if I went off on too far a tangent, but
No,
there's
no,
some.
no, not at all. It reminds me of. I mean, it sounds like music is what taught you that not only to love learning, but also that you could learn. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, yeah. It's intimidating going into running or music or anything like that when you're in your mid to late 20s or even later stages, if your whole mantra is that you've been taught that people are born with these natural skills. Mozart was practicing music since he was 4 years old. It can kind of feel
Yeah.
intimidating and pointless to jump into something, but learning that I could learn both on the piano aspect and then the physical running. I mean, that was a huge impact on other things that I decided to take up later, such as data science.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience with language. Before, in high school, my dad, my friends, most everybody kind of thought that I just wasn't very good at studying. Later in life, like literally 6 months ago, I was diagnosed with ADHD, but I'd never been diagnosed with it before. I just found this out now.
Mm-hmm.
But earlier, people just thought I was dumb, and I tended to believe them. Like I believed each one of them in that idea, and I never wanted to go to college. My grades in high school weren't that good. It was actually going on this service mission. So I did a service mission for 2 years, and I was told to learn Cantonese, and Cantonese is the second hardest language in the world to learn. And so my friends and my family, like everybody doubts it. Like, well, we're really worried and concerned that you have to learn this language. You're probably not going to be able to do it. This is the second hardest language. And then getting out there and realizing that, hey, if I actually learn the why behind what I'm doing, like what is the purpose, why are the words a certain way, I can actually remember them. So I made my own approach to studying, and then I realized, hey, I really like studying. And when I got back home, I went back to university, and it was this. I did almost the exact same thing after learning the languages. Within 6 months, I was convincing Chinese people on the phone that I was Chinese. And then I started getting into sports. I lost like 40 pounds just because I was like, man, I can apply the same thing to like nutrition and activities and sports. Got back home and I was like, I'm going to do the same thing in university. Signed up. I had no intentions of going to school, end up graduating with 2 degrees and with a close to 4.0 GPA, better than my friends in high school. Applying the same thing. It was this weird, like, waking up kind of moment of, okay, what people were saying is not right. You know, you're not born with abilities. You're not born with, some people might have a gift, but at the same time, that it's the hard work that makes up all the difference. But it sounds like that was music for you. Like that's what got you across that bridge mentally.
No doubt, no doubt, and I love hearing that from you too, because I imagine that there are just so many people out there who feel like what they are right now is their reality and is permanent. But you can just make such big transformations, and it's amazing hearing that. But like I feel like I was a fairly confident person before picking up music and all that, but it like being able to take something that was like a complete 90-degree turn from anything that I was doing in life at the time, had nothing artistic going on at all. That was a great entry point to not just learning music itself, but learning how to transform and how to change and how to pick up new things that are completely different than what I'd been doing in the past.
Yeah, that's rad. And now you have you tell horror stories on a podcast where you play music, right? Can you tell me a little bit about this? Maybe Anthony can pull up let's see.
Mature audience
Oh,
is
it's
only
on
kind of
Twitch.
the appropriate warning. Yes, on
Oh, there
Twitch,
you go.
and you have to deal with the Twitch ads, and I'm not getting paid on that ad. It's not fair.
Are you
Uh,
serious?
yeah, but either way. So after picking up music, I played in a band for a couple of years called Creature Camp, and
Uh-huh.
had a lot of fun doing that. But like there came a point where I wanted to like pick up some new skills around data science and learn around like statistical modeling and things like that. So I put the music on halt and went to do these studies. But over time, I had never gotten back to it. I hadn't been performing on stages or anything like that. I was still practicing every day, and I still just had this gigantic itch to take some sort of art and perform it for people.
Mm-hmm.
So, like the weird thing about that is like by the time I started the Twitch channel, which was in May or June of last year, we were deep in a pandemic. So there's no way that I could go out and play in bands or perform live. It was basically, there's no way to perform music live and in bands. There's no way to get some of my projects back together. So why not just do something a little bit different on streaming media? That seems like a good way to reach out to people and share music. And by doing that, it just started with Edgar Allan Poe's Fall of the House of Usher.
Mm-hmm.
Did and basically read the story, practiced it, practiced reading the story while playing some really creepy soundscapes and music and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
That would come in and out based on what was going on in the story, and that was a small start, but it was just really fun. Like I had a lot of friends who had like seen musical performance before joining in as well. And Twitch is really cool because while you're performing, you're seeing people say things and respond directly and things like that. And I like to, like, while I'm reading the stories, break out of character and talk to people and bring them into the story, or even like create little interactive visualizations or sounds that come in response to different things you can do. It's a really fun platform to work with.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, it just kind of opened the door where you're performing, but at the same time being part of this community that you're building. And over time, I think people like that format. Actually, that led to a lot of things that I'm doing at the company that I work for right now. Was like this kind of intro to like going live and being a little bit vulnerable, being like knowing that I could make mistakes and mess up the performance, but still going on anyway, and just taking this audience feedback in real time and having a discussion in real time.
Now, how did this bridge into then data science? Because what you're doing right now is so different.
Yeah. So data science. I mean, there's a parallel path there, always budding. In college, I had read Freakonomics and found that to be really inspiring. And the reason that inspired me at the time was because you have all these opinions that people have, these ways people think that the world works. But when you start, like I never liked taking all that all the things that people believed at face value.
Yeah.
So Freakonomics takes these so-called rogue economists and some of their studies around things like hiring practices, like whether or not people were racially biased in their hiring practices, but have these interesting tests like submitting a bunch of fake resumes, but some with white sounding names and some with black sounding names, and seeing if there's a difference in hiring and difference in interviews based on that, based on the information being sent out. So all these data driven approaches that allowed people to challenge conventions and challenge norms always fascinated me. So that was always in the back of my head. And over time, the like at the beginning of my career, like in college, I didn't study programming or data science or anything like that at the time. A lot of those programs didn't exist. But like after I had learned music and after I had learned that I could perform at running, well, what about this new task of taking data sets and seeing what insights we can learn about them that might help identify different reasons to reach out to patients or just like challenge the norms of thinking on various things. So
what would be examples of that?
Where it got started. So I didn't want to go like overly detailed into my whole career progression.
I like detail. We have time for details, so detail's good.
Oh, good. Okay, then I'll go through it. If that's cool. So my career started out in sales. When I was in college, I sold cars and then had a good relationship with one of my customers. And then after I graduated, kind of had this job waiting for me after like some communications and networking. I had a job waiting for me in the healthcare IT and healthcare analytics space, but it was on more of a sales and communication basis. Mm-hmm. Over time, that role transitioned into operations and analytics, still supporting a sales team. And it's just another example of a bunch of those cases where there's all kinds of sales methods that are tried and true, and say this at this point in the call, and like make this many touch points or reach out to organizations that are in this particular status. But like that Freakonomics mindset always remained in my mind. It's like, well, what opportunities are we missing out on by not looking at or understanding the data behind it? Like what can, like data, I look at data as like a collection of things that happened. Like instead of looking at it as rows on a spreadsheet, it's gleaning as much information as you can about various things that happened, and seeing if that gives you any insight or any evidence that changing behavior in a certain way might cause different effects. So the types of problems that I was solving early on into that data science journey were very tied to the work that I was doing. Mm-hmm. So I was doing an analytics role, and like, you know, and if anybody is listening who is in analytics and wants to go into to things like data science, the big advantage that I had was like, well, if we have all this data on interactions that we've had with hospitals and how our sales team has reached out and what were the various qualities or characteristics of successful engagements, then we can start looking at and predicting, well, who in the market should we be reaching out to? Where are we missing revenue opportunities? So those were some of the early problems that once I started going deeper and learning code and learning statistics and data science, machine learning, and things like that, started to help answer those types of problems for the company that I was working for at the time. Of course, I was always another part that fueled it was jealousy. My buddy on the who was leading the data science efforts at the company, they were working on some really cool, really impactful problems. Identifying like, hey, can we look at a set of digital breadcrumbs to start identifying what are services that we should be communicating to patients about? What are different ways that we can help people to better engage in their care? So it became working with kind of the more sales oriented data sets that I started out with was kind of fuel for, proving out capability, getting the reps and practice rounds in to start working on bigger and more impactful problems in data science.
Interesting. So today you're at SymphonyRM in this data science side. Can you give me examples of like what this looks like in kind of like everyday experiences as to what you guys are seeing?
Yeah. So SymphonyRM is in the healthcare analytics space, and where what we're helping is helping hospitals to identify the types of communications, the type of outreach, the ways that they should be engaging their patient and physician populations. This is something that's very common in like other industries, retail, banking, finance. We see it when, like, if we go to Amazon, there's a big understanding of, based on our past behaviors and things like that,
Sure.
what are some things that we're likely to engage in the future. For healthcare, it's difficult because whereas Amazon in its earlier days, one of the questions that they would ask at every meeting was, "Hey, where can we use machine learning to solve a problem, or where can we use data science to solve a problem?" The data sets that like the where data has been captured and collected in healthcare wasn't built with those kinds of analytic or like prescriptive analytic decision use cases in mind. So what working with healthcare data involves, like, to be able to make predictions that are accurate and useful and helpful, it involves not just a lot of it's not a bunch of scientists in lab coats in a room deploying neural networks and like working with the latest buzzword algorithms that are available. There's a lot of cleanup that has to happen. There's a lot of going in and coming in with an assumption, coming in with a hypothesis, then working through that problem and finding out that, oh, I had the wrong assumption, or, oh, that this is actually not a clinically valid set of statistics that we're using. So with I mean, there's a strong parallel with anybody who's doing analytics or trying to find novel ways to make predictions and solve problems. Is that, like, what day-to-day looks like is discussing approaches with the team, testing those approaches, and then often, like, going in and getting buried, and then sometimes failing, hopefully learning something along the way, but sometimes identifying that, oh, like, this set of variables or this set of information actually isn't predictive or isn't helpful at helping to identify the outcome that we're looking for.
I'd
But
love to have an example of one of these. Is there any example you could give of something that you have worked on or that you're recently working on where the data doesn't lead up to, like where basically there's a disconnect between the data and the predictive nature of the outcome?
yeah. One good example, because it's when you go into things like natural language processing, it becomes much harder than, like, if you're working with the data set with a bunch of clear labels. So there was a project that I was working on to see if by using, well, to basically see what we could understand about patient experiences by gleaning information from the reviews that they were leaving. So what that involved was building up a data set that looked at Google reviews or Yelp reviews, depending on the case, but built up a data set that had people's reviews and the star rankings that they left, all publicly available information. We were basically seeing if we could use that publicly available information to understand something about the experience that people had. Well, there were all kinds of like when in natural language processing, there's all kinds of problems that like, oh, you have a body of text, you have like somebody just type this review in, they type this information in, and you're trying to look at thousands of those reviews, thousands of those to mine insight. There's all kinds of different data mining and topic modeling approaches that look at things like how frequently one word appears with another word, or how frequently some phrase appears with another phrase to help identify insights. But there's techniques like, well, I mean, I could go into the names of like latent Dirichlet allocation, things like that. But
well, what would be the end result of like that thing? So like, what are you trying to? So in looking at all these reviews, what is the goal of being able to, what are you trying to glean from that?
In healthcare, what we're trying to glean with that, like in healthcare, there are these newer organizations coming in that use new business models and use newer technologies than what the traditional hospital players have typically used. You have organizations like Amazon coming in, Walmart Health, and One Medical, and many others. So the project, I could actually drop a link to that too. But what we were trying to understand was these new kind of disruptor organizations that are reaching out to patients and getting significant market share because of the type of experience that they're offering. Well, what kind of experience? What were the satisfiers and dissatisfiers that people were talking about after they had experiences with those organizations?
I see. So maybe they say something like, the way that we booked our appointment was so easy, or they talk about the efficiency of it or the convenience of it, or specific things that they're bringing up repeatedly that helps you to understand what they appreciate about the visit.
No doubt. Love it. Because if you have enough people saying the same thing about their visit, and those visits are negative or positive, they're 5-star reviews versus 1-star reviews, then you can start looking at how frequently the things that they're talking about appear in negative reviews. And then you can start mining out, like, the word "the" is going to, of course, appear in every review.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
start mining out the words the words and phrases that appear commonly, and start being able to look at the phrases that you actually want to associate with positive and negative reviews. So some of the findings from that were, the one that I'm most excited about, honestly, is around virtual visits. So virtual visit, the idea that somebody, like, it's a lot more commonplace today with
For sure.
with healthcare having become
It's
what
like
it is.
all you do now.
Yeah, exactly. So those skyrocketed, but it was novel whenever One Medical was bringing it onto the market. They really invested in having a good virtual visit experience, and looking into that data set, we found that was actually, like, I believe, the second most commonly used term associated with positive reviews. So it was
Which
really
was what,
interesting.
the virtual visit, or
Topics related to virtual visits.
I see.
Yeah. So it was really exciting to understand that, oh, well, by making a significant investment in their virtual visits, it became something that patients thought was worth talking about, and did so in a repeated way. Like, hospitals had been debating and arguing about whether or not to employ virtual visits and what the reimbursement strategies were and everything like that. But this was clear evidence that the virtual visit was providing a good experience for patients. And this was before this knowledge that we were able to acquire before the pandemic. So for many years, they had been having positive experiences with those virtual visits.
Yeah, I mean, the data that you guys are finding that helps to make these decisions has a very visceral impact on an everyday consumer's life. Like in terms of, I've seen what SymphonyRM is doing in like what Yeneth does, and just going back to this particular subject of virtual visits, for example, all of my recent visits, everything in 2020 except for like actual lab work and stuff like that, has been virtual. And for the overall experience, it's been fantastic. And the company, the amount of money that's behind these companies, I would imagine they are hunting and searching and using companies like yours to figure out the best solutions and what is the best thing that they can implement to make consumers happy.
There are a lot of reasons why people partner with us. Patient experience is being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
The research on One Medical actually isn't part of the core offering. It was more of a project that we were using to identify, hey, what kind of strategic recommendations could we be making?
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, definitely when it like I think that kind of Freakonomics mindset that I brought up earlier, it's really coming into play more, whether people know it or not, or associated with Freakonomics or not. People are more and more looking at data, a log of historic events, as a way to start validating decisions and validating the type of outreach and things that they do.
Yeah. You know what's fascinating about the way that you talk and the way that you describe everything is that I can tell that you are driven by an internal, you could say, an internal value or an internal belief to explain why. Like you have a very strong drive to understand the why and the nuance behind everything. I would imagine that that's exactly what drew you into ultras, is knowing the nuances of why does this happen at this point, and why at mile 70 is this going on, and what can I do to fix this. And you probably approach music the same way, do you not? Like, do you look at scales and go, why does this scale create a certain feeling in somebody? Like, what is the emotion that's attached to this, and how can I? Is that something that's universal for you?
Gosh, yeah, that hits the nail on the head. And it like part of what you were talking about, the way that you structure education and the kinds of things that impact you, like you were very emphatic about why as well. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I annoyed my parents with that question for years, why? And now I kind of annoy myself with it, like just constantly looking for the why.
That's so interesting. Are you? Can I ask? Are you married? Do you have a girlfriend, partner?
Yeah, I have a partner. Yeah, we kind of met on the trails, so
Rad.
we share that passion for torturous distances. Of course, she goes a little bit faster than me, but I try to keep up with
Oh,
her on
all
trails.
right. Go girl. Dang. I'm keeping you on your toes, man.
No doubt.
Well, I feel like that why becomes very critical in uh, relationships that you surround yourself with. I would imagine that your friends, the people that are closest to you, are people that are equally curious and ambitious, and they push forward, looking for their own types of answers and their own solutions. But they share that drive. Is that a fair assessment, or do you feel like I'm very much a student of psychology, so I like to understand what makes people tick, especially when you're a case where you dive into these nuances into everything. That's very curious to see.
Cool. Well, I guess I mean I hadn't thought about it, but I'm just thinking about my circle right now,
Yeah,
and yeah, I feel like there's a good compatibility with people that like to just dig to the bottom of some subject, or just
sure.
really dig deep. A lot of the conversations center around purpose, and then purpose, and then like what kind of silly implications or fun things can we come up with based on that.
Yeah, so you have ultra running, you have your music, you have data science. What else is going on?
Gosh, I wish I could say more, but that's keeping me really busy.
Those are a lot of things.
So what really what I struggle with is like work. Well, like I have a little bit of a problem with the term work-life balance, but I took some time off recently and realized how valuable that is, how valuable it is to take time off and be able to just reflect and relax and all that. But gosh, I just wish I had a little bit more time for the music and streaming part. Hit some really nice goals last year with streaming and haven't been able to keep up with it quite as much, just because recently got into a new role and just focusing really heavily on that. But if there was anything that I would like to be doing more of, would be music composition and doing my weekly streams.
Yeah, that's awesome. But how do you imagine, like, how would you make more time for those things? I know that SymphonyRM is a great company, and they actually allow. When I talked to Yen about it, they're like, "Oh yeah, there's no limit on vacation time or like time off," and I was like, "I know why they do that, because then
Mm-hmm.
you kind of feel this sense of urgency to do more. You know, like if they're going to give me that kind of freedom, it almost has this weird reverse effect." But how are you making time for yourself to pursue those other things?
Uh, see, it's understanding what I'm capable of, and understanding how I can better rely on other people in my team and other people that support me as well, and just making sure to carve out time to be intentional, to carve out time to talk to you, and all these other things. Like um, another way of thinking about it too is kind of bringing things into that same circle, music
Yeah,
specifically. Like with the whys in music, um, latest interest has been, and I haven't produced anything with this. I've only been practicing and learning, but latest interest is taking a programming language like Python and using that to produce music. So
oh,
basically,
that's an interesting
uh,
idea.
yeah. So uh, basic concept is what kind of like when you were asked a little bit earlier about the why, like looking at a scale and why does it make somebody feel a certain way, then that becomes a question that you really have to think hard about when your ultimate focus is creating an algorithm that is able to make pleasing or haunting or music that evokes specific reactions. This isn't something I've only coded as far as like having some understanding on how to generate certain tones and things like that.
Yeah,
But right now, it's kind of like in a just figuring out phase as far as like how can we arrive at music algorithmically, or how can we create some sort of environment where people can feed back to the music, to the sounds that they're hearing, and then sculpt it in some way where it's not unlistenable. Like it's listenable, but it's also interactive.
that's very interesting. So with Twitch and with your music, is there a overarching goal, or is this more so your time to kind of creatively explore?
Explore. Like I think what happened with music and what happened with Twitch and all that is that you go down a path and you keep doing things down that path, and like built up a little bit of a following on Twitch, or built up a following on music in Birmingham. But basically, it's like when I started running, I didn't have a goal of running 100 miles. I had a goal of running a half marathon, but like I just kind of kept getting into tangential situations and being open to change and new opportunities and not saying no to them and just trying out different things.
Yeah,
Um, with this, with the idea of algorithmically generated music, that would be kind of like a solution chasing a problem. Like nobody's walking around saying, "Gosh, I need more algorithmically generated music in my life."
sure.
But yeah, there could be some opportunities uh, with regards to something like that. Like if people need background music, but they don't want to pay like exorbitant like DMCA fees in a public setting, then there's potentially an opportunity for that. So, it's the goal is kind of to be open and see where something like that might take me.
Yeah, I love creative pursuits that have no purpose beyond the pursuit itself. One of the things that I talk to quite a few people in the creative space, and many of them, they look at photography as a hobby, or they look at cinematography as a hobby, and they want to turn that thing into their profession. And to each of them, I say the same thing, which is, as soon as you do that, you lose what you, a lot of times you lose what it is that you loved about the thing. Like when photography is your pursuit, and when it's that thing that is, without any goal, without any aim, it's that thing that you enjoy, then it's loose and it's free form. You do what you want when you want, and that's it. It's your place to explore. As soon as you attach a profession to it and you say that I need to make money now with this thing, then you attach the expectations of a client. You attach different timetables. You remove the creative limit, like the creative possibilities, and you now apply limitations to it, and it becomes something very, very different. So I like the idea of, like, I always have things in my life that are just they're without purpose. Like I'm at jiu-jitsu not because I ever want to be a professional jiu-jitsu player. Like I have no aspirations of that whatsoever, and I'm pretty awful at it. But it's the journey and the pursuit that I love. Same thing with cycling. Same thing with so many of the things that I do. So I think that's important to have those areas that are just for exploring. And if it leads to something great, but otherwise it's already doing what it's supposed to do.
Gosh, yeah, I like that, and I like the idea of what you're doing is creating a space where it's okay to do something that's not the intention of becoming the next unicorn $1 billion startup.
It's weird how it's becoming that, though, right? It's weird how there's this constant societal pressure to innovate and monetize.
Yeah. Twitch, it monetizes, but it's not. I don't refer to it as a side hustle because it's just art that I like to do.
Can you actually turn Twitch into a full-time gig? Is that like people like do on YouTube? Is that possible now with Twitch?
Definitely. Actually, one of the people that got me into streaming on Twitch, her name's Raquel Lilly. Hey, Raquel. She, if you look her up, like she's like early days, like twitch.tv/Raquel, just her name.
Oh, crazy.
But she's one of like the earliest music streamers on Twitch. And that's like basically the core of her income is streaming on Twitch, and people subscribe. So yeah, when people subscribe to your channel, then you get half of the revenues from that. And there's sponsorships associated with it. And and plus like doing something like music, it opens up the door to like, oh, your fans want you to play at their wedding or something like that.
Interesting.
And plus, like when you get as high up in the level with Twitch as she is, then they're like sponsoring like these events and conventions and things like that, and she's going and performing at those and doing things actually globally. So Twitch can for those that want it, it can open up really big opportunities.
Yeah, it's very interesting how many different ways there are today to make a living. It almost feels like the further we go down the road, the more I have to protect my hobbies as just being hobbies. Like I literally I find myself telling myself that, like, this is just a hobby and I have to protect that time. Otherwise, I'll end up working nonstop.
Yeah. And you end up beholden to, you create some enterprise, and then you're beholden to a group of people. And then, like, if it started out as a hobby and then you lose the feeling for it, but you're still obligated because there's people's jobs and livelihoods on the line, then you become deep down a rabbit hole, and it becomes a very difficult decision to walk away.
That happens more often than you and I know. I see that happening. There's so many people where you can see this on a micro level, where they get famous or popular on social media for one particular thing, and that one particular thing isn't even something that they like. That's not who they are. That's not what they are. But they fall into this place of like, dance monkey dance, because you did this thing and now we just want more of that thing. I feel like I see this often on TikTok.
So you're seeing a trend where these people are becoming influencers for whatever this thing is, and then they become beholden to that audience.
Yeah, like for example, there's several that will go on and they'll have like say some sort of a gimmick, right? So maybe there's one girl that hopped on and she speaks with a Indian accent, and so with everything, it's like I can't do a good Indian accent, so she'll come on and she'll say like, "Let me help you with this" or whatever, but in an Indian accent. Then that one video blows up, so she makes more of them, and then she becomes the funny Indian girl on TikTok. Now, this person is probably far more sophisticated than that. They probably have all sorts of, crazy talents and abilities. For all we know, they could be a doctor. But millions of people just want her to be the funny Indian girl. That's it. Like don't tell me about anything else. Like just be funny and speak in your accent.
Dance monkey, yeah.
Yeah.
That dance monkey dance becomes really powerful.
Yeah, so it's happening like everywhere. And it's weird. It's starting to kind of become this pervasive thing in our lives where more and more I'm meeting entrepreneurs who can't get away from not being productive. If that makes any sense. Like they can't
Who
turn it off.
Yeah, yeah. I can feel you on that, and sometimes there's a balance there, because on the one hand, you really like there you can really benefit and really have a better relationship with yourself if you can take it easy on yourself. But then there's this other hand that I've been really wondering about, and I'm wondering if you have any insights on it. But when somebody is in that 100% grind mode, it could be
Yeah.
their comfort zone. It could be what they like to do. But then like the conversations about treating yourself and relaxing and taking care of self-care and everything like that, that kind of type A mentality that they have might transfer over to like, geez, I'm not doing enough self-care. I got to go hardcore relax now.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on people that need the grind.
I think that the grind for a lot of people, and I'll tell you myself included, is a distraction. Like I was for 15 years, I was in a really bad marriage, and it was not good. And I remember back then, I had this unbridled ambition, man. I mean, I was working nonstop for several reasons. One of them was like I wanted to be successful at this thing in business. And I wanted to have something that was in my control because I felt like what was going on at home was so far out of my control. So I put every bit of my attention into the business, and then the other half of the attention went into just as aggressively trying to fix the marriage. But for me, being at work was the most welcome distraction I could possibly have.
Mm.
So I meet a lot of people that are type A and they are very driven, but many of them are driven internally, and they're they're all driven internally, but many for reasons of distraction. For me, it was I didn't want to be at home. Being at home was not my good place, and slowing myself down to relax sounded like it wasn't just it sounded like if I was on a beach laying in a hammock, it was the most miserable thing in the world because my mind would just go nonstop. So anything I could throw myself into was welcome. Granted, after leaving that and then getting to a healthy place and then creating the healthy home environment that I've wanted, now my ambition has changed. I still want to I'm still very ambitious, but it's more of a look, I've spent 40 years on this planet. I don't know, I could die tomorrow. I want to make as much of an impact as I can before I leave. And then the other half of my ambition is how efficient can I be so I can get more time with my family, more time at home, and more experiences with them. So it's a very different place and mindset than before. But I think that's a lot of I think a lot of us we turn to various things as our coping mechanisms, for whatever might be going on, and ambition is one of those mechanisms, or
That's a really
blind
good
ambition.
point. Yeah, I love the way that you kind of that you highlighted hey, 15 years of kind of using work as a way to get away from the issue that was really troubling. Curious, like what made you, like, what was the aha moment that made you realize that this has got to change, and how hard was it to scrape away from that addiction too?
I mean, uh, I feel like once you get that deep, it's multiple critical failures that it basically gets to a place where the change has to be less difficult than staying the same. You know, like doing the same thing day in, and for me, it came down to I was thinking of suicide. So one day I was driving home. It's kind of got a little dark here, but I was driving home one day and I had this thought of I could just turn my car over this bridge or go right into a pole and just be done with it. And immediately after the thought, I was like, that's really dumb. I mean, I have two kids and I just thought of this as opposed to I used to be a very religious person, and so the idea of divorce didn't exist, but somehow the idea of suicide did. And I came to that realization of like how wild and wacky is that, and how backwards am I that this is where I am right now. So it was getting to a place in life where it was easier to change than it was to stay the same.
I feel you on that. And as hard as it is to talk about suicide, I think it's something that people should be more comfortable discussing too, because it's like suicidal thoughts. I've had suicidal thoughts as well, and it's pervasive. It's everywhere, and there are certain careers that are really impacted by that. And I think that if there's shame in having discourse about the things that really challenge us and the thoughts that we really have, then there's a whole lot of people who are kind of unnecessarily forced to suffer in silence while the person next to them on the bus or whatever is suffering from that same thing, but nobody can really talk about it or bring it up. So
No, I
as
agree.
dark as that consideration is, I mean, it's admirable that you would discuss it openly.
Only to the extent, like, I mean, I'm an open book, namely just for one reason, because if I've gone through this, I can imagine there's many people that have gone through the same or might be going through it or any of those things. So it kind of was this whole journey that led me to creating the book that would lead to the podcast. You know, Stupid Simple. Think Stupid Simple is a play on Stupid Simple Relationships, the first book that I've written. And the goal is just kind of uncovering these little truths type thing, the whys behind. My first why that I wanted to answer is, what does a healthy relationship look like?
Mm-hmm.
So in a lot of ways, as you're describing your journey, I was kind of thinking like it's very similar in the way that I have to know the why behind every single thing that I'm doing. Otherwise, it has no meaning to me. It has no purpose.
Yeah. And it's interesting that we've had a conversation about obsessive and relentless pursuit of why, and then getting into every detail and nuance of why. But then some of the most satisfying moments are just things like that, where the why is because it sounds cool and I hadn't heard anything like that before, and let's try this thing out or do this weird thing online.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have no, like I said earlier, I have no ambition in jiu-jitsu, right? But I still approach it with the why. Probably to the point where I drive my professors mad because they'll be like, okay, you're going to take the person's back and then, choke them. And I'll be like, Professor, why do I want to take their back? And then because you do. And I'm like, but why? Why? Like I asked the most, so like that same, even though I have no goals with jiu-jitsu other than self-fulfillment, that need to explain why or to understand applies to every single thing that I do.
No doubt. And I can think of a similar example. I was in this was like way back in 7th grade in German class. There was they brought in this headphone system where the teacher would talk into it, and then we would be able to respond with a microphone back in, and she would be able to hear the response. And I raised my hand and said, like, this is a big expensive system and everybody's wearing these headphones and everything like that. And I was like, why do we need to talk into microphones when we're just all right here? And she said her only response was, why do people climb mountains? Because they do. And I was like, that stuck with me, because like some people, like I really get along with people that are focused on that why, because otherwise, I don't know, maybe I don't want to be wearing some random headphones for absolutely no reason, not be able to explain it or understand it.
No, I'm with you on that, man. And I was always the odd one out, because most of my close friends in high school, you tell them that, hey, it's important to know geometry. And they go, okay, I will learn it. And I'm like, why do I need to learn geometry? You got to tell me. Like I was always that. And so people thought it was a learning disability when I was young. I think we've come a ways in terms of understanding how each person learns, but I'm with you, dude. Like, to me, I can't wrap my head around something unless I get the purpose of it, no matter how simple it is.
Man, that makes me really excited. Just thinking about, I mean, we're not alone in that. I mean, there are some people that can go into some like really abstract subject and just fixate on like the peculiarities inside of that abstract thing. But for a lot of people, this is an example. This was something I just heard on a Freakonomics podcast recently, where they were trying to teach math and statistics to middle schoolers, math, statistics, and programming. Yeah. And rather than taking the approach of saying this is standard deviation, yada yada yada, like teaching all these concepts in abstract, they allowed people to like focus on like, build a regression model on something that you care about. And somebody built something to predict like how much hair product somebody would need, like given some other circumstance. So like by allowing people taking math away from this abstract theoretical thing where you ask your teacher, why are we studying this? And they say, well, it's going to be very useful when you get to college, and then it's going to be very useful in your career, but then you never see that math used again. Rather than that, is focusing on, hey, here's an application of where you can apply math to something that you love. And it really helped with students who were otherwise completely uninterested. Well, now when I can predict what Game of Thrones character is going to do this, or well, not Game of Thrones with 7th grade audience, but basically when they were allowed to go and choose the problems they wanted to focus on, and then it stopped being advanced statistics and started being like, this is how I can predict something in some domain I care about.
For sure. I think that's the way that all education has to go. Like, one of my things that I've felt for a very long time is that our educational system is dead and dying, because it by and large, it still focuses on the theory of things rather than the practical application of them. And, you know, every class would be so much different. Like, I mean, imagine going to a history class and for your teacher to say, okay, let's talk George Floyd, and let's talk about all the other instances in recent history that have happened that can point us to what is going on right now. You know, like, that would be such a different class and topic. But instead, you get to history class and it's, okay, the pioneers came over on which ship? The Mayflower. And you're like, good job. You're going to get a great score on your test. And it's just like, what the hell is going on? Like, how are we keep repeating the same mistakes across the board in every, you know, relationships are no different. I wrote the book on Stupid Simple Relationships because I felt so aggravated by all the just clinical bullshit that has no application whatsoever to real life relationships. I mean, how many psychology classes, I took a few psychology classes, but for something in our lives that is so absolutely critical to not only a person's success and happiness, how is it that I know no more about volcanoes and earthquakes, which was actually the class that I took in college. It's called Volcanoes and Earthquakes. Mm-hmm. I knew more about that graduating in college than I knew about a functioning relationship. And yet, like relationships, when I think about every single job that I've ever had, it came down to who I knew and who referred me, whether it was at the interview, during the interview, before the fact, whatever it might be. When you think about happiness, how much of that is based on the people that you choose to surround you and what you have going on at home. But earthquakes and volcanoes, that was my college class.
Number one priority. You know what? I've thought about that, not necessarily in terms of relationships, but also in terms of like useful life skills like finance and everything like that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
understanding how to manage your own personal portfolio. A lot of accountants are actually like professional corporate accountants are bad at their personal finances, and it makes me think maybe there's a potential blind leading the blind scenario with that, where
1000%.
yeah, and it's going to keep perpetuating until there's some sort of change, some sort of fundamental change to why people are like why we have an education system in the first place.
A perfect example along those lines of personal finance is, do you remember? I remember in 7th grade, they taught us how to balance a checkbook. Do you remember that? Did you ever do that?
It wasn't the same exact thing, but they had us do this like dream life project where we had to select a job and then income and then like talk about all our finances and expenses and stuff like that in 7th grade. That's how it was for us.
Okay, maybe that's a little bit better. But to me, this is like the quintessential failing of like what an educational system is supposed to be doing. We're learning how to balance a checkbook when that's a skill related to a technology that is going to be outdated. I mean, we had to know back then that one day we're not going to be writing checks anymore. But the actual process of understanding personal finance and expenditures and how much money's coming in and good financial decisions, that wasn't part of the subject matter. What was important was it's not even, what would that be? It's like teaching somebody the notes on a piano without showing them how to play it.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like I would call that like rote memorization, where
Yeah.
hey, take this and remember this, and like it might even be useful. Like a lot of the math that people are taught is useful, but they're not taught why it's useful and how to think about it more broadly to where it actually has an application. Balance
Yeah.
this checkbook, but no here's the task of balancing a checkbook, but no understanding or broader application to like how it relates to how I'm managing my personal financial situation.
Exactly. So that kind of stuff is fascinating to me because I feel like most of us escape our youth and the current educational cycle. We get out of it missing so many important life skills, but then we aced calculus. So I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, it's kind of like when I reflect back, spent a lot of years in education, a lot of years going through that, and I do have regrets about like the way it's structured and everything like that. And I guess the main thing that I fixate on are the few. There's just a few teachers that were really fundamentally impactful in my life and in a good
Yeah.
way, and I at least take that from it.
There were those moments.
Yeah,
They were few and far between, but they were memorable.
exactly. Yeah, we do, and I think that we overly glamorize the experience that people have with education, and we often, it just a lot of times it sounds a whole lot better than what it is, and people talk about like the respect they have for every teacher and everything like that, when really often it was blind leading the blind, or people who might not have had an expertise or excitement around what they were teaching, and we kind of pick up on that and carry it with us.
Yeah. 100%, man. Well, Chris, dude, I appreciate you coming onto the podcast and having this conversation with me, taking the time out of your day, man. It was a great little chat, and I enjoyed it.
Cool. Yeah, I learned a lot in this conversation, and it's awesome that you're doing this, and I'm looking forward to tuning in.
For sure, dude. And in the meantime, I would say if anyone's listening and they want to follow your Twitch or Instagram, or where do you point them to so that we can link it up?
Easiest places, like if you want the professional context, is LinkedIn, Chris Hemphill, or if you want the snark and joke posting and stuff like that, Luke Trailrunner on Twitter, and then like the Twitch is Musique Macabre. But you know, if you're looking for that and you add Luke Trailrunner, I can point you where to go.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm probably going to be hitting you up for some more nutritional advice when it comes to endurance sports, but I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, I'll be glad to share running stories with you.
I don't know if I'll catch the bug, but I'll let you know. I'll let you know.
All right. Thank you.
All right, dude. Thanks, brother.